In this series, we're going to be taking a look at every single Hiya Exquisite basic figure in the Godzilla line, every repaint, reissue, 2.0, whatever they put out. We're going to be taking a look at them all in release order. Let's get started. So, the Skull Devil, as seen in Kong Skull Island, this is meant to represent the large alpha skull crawler that Kong fights at the end of the movie. Realistically, I'm pretty certain the only difference between a normal skull crawler and this Skull Devil is that the Skull Devil is going to have spikes on the elbows and the head has a more defined skull shape. While this isn't technically the first skull crawler toy that we've ever gotten, I believe that honor goes to Jack Pacific's, I think, and more recently, Playmates also put out a skull crawler. But this is the first highly articulated skull crawler figure we have ever gotten, and still to this day have ever gotten. Now I'm actually going to shake things up a little bit in this video, and we're going to go over articulation first. Where as you can see, the Skull Devil, or the skull crawler, is basically just a snake with arms. So I did something very interesting with this figure. Let's get right into it. So starting off with the head, the neck is on a ball joint, and you're going to get him looking up about that far, looking down about that far, and looking side to side about that much. The base of the head itself is also on a ball joint, but it's going to be a little more limited. With the two working together, you can look and get it looking up about that much, and only down about that far, and side to side, going to be about that much. Pretty decent side range. As for the mouth itself, what's very interesting is both the upper and lower parts of the jaw are on hinges, and they work in tandem with each other. So as you move the lower jaw down, the upper jaw will also move up. It's a very neat mechanism. And what's also very nice is the inner membranes are actually cast out of a rubber material. So as you can see there, they will naturally fold in and out. That rubber piece is going to be right there attached to the roof of the mouth, and actually the entire lower part, everything connected to the tongue right here, that's all one rubber piece. Do be careful with this, guys. There have been many reports of these membranes splitting in half just due to the rubber flexing. Mine haven't split, although there is some suggestion that they're starting to slowly deteriorate. There's a little stress mark in the middle of the membrane right there. I don't leave this figure with the mouth open too often. I want to try and protect that as much as I can. But yeah, tongue does not move. It's glued in place. But again, that's all just one large rubber piece. Still, that's a very cool mechanism to see on the head. Moving on to the arms, the shoulders are going to be on hinges, so they can hinge out pretty good amount. And then at the peg down there, they can swivel all the way around. Biceps are on swivels. The elbows are on double hinges, so you can move them out. You can straighten them out all the way, and then you can get them bent all the way up. That's a very nice range for the elbows. And then the wrists, the ankles, whatever you want to call these are, just like Ghidorah, revolver joints. So you're going to get the foot swiveling down on that axis, and then you can separately rotate the foot at the upper peg and at the lower peg. But it is not a ball joint. If you want any crazy poses, you'll have to get this in just the right spot, but it's not that bad. I don't mind revolver joints when they're on feet like this. It was only a little annoying with Ghidorah's wings. Moving on to the body. So got a couple ball joints. There's one here, and one here. And when you work them together, you can get him arcing back about that much, and then you can get a really nice, it's effectively an ab crunch. And then side to side, a pretty good range of motion there. But what's really impressive is what Hiya did with this tail. This is one long, flexible piece of material. There is a wire in there, so it can move at the end on the ball joint. But then this entire tail is just one large bendy wire piece. And it's a pretty sturdy bendy wire. I'm sure it's multiple wires coiled up in there, but I mean, you can feel it. That wire is pretty thick. It's almost as thick as the thickness of the tail, and it's down to about right there at the end of the tail. So you do get a very impressive amount of range from that bendy wire tail. And you're able to get this thing in some crazy poses as a result of that tail. Speaking of impressive, let us now talk about the fine sculpt work and paint on this figure, because this figure looks very impressive. All over the body, head to tail, you have a very nice layered scaling sculpted in. They did a remarkable job capturing all of this skin texturing. I mean, just look at all that on the neck and the body. It's very rough, it's very coarse, but then it also naturally fades into a more organic skeletal like texturing up here at the back ridge, and even down into the arms going into the feet, underneath the figure on the belly, especially. I mentioned this on Ghidorah, but this figure especially looks very Giger alien like as it slowly and gradually fades into a smoother texture for the tail, although that's likely just because of the rubber material. While it is a softer material, there is still some very fine uh, texturing going on all the way down to the end of the tail there. And what's very impressive is the fact that this is bendable. A lot of that sculpted detailing doesn't actually get lost when you start articulating this tail. It holds up. This thing looks mean. It looks fierce. The lower jaw is a little brighter than the rest of the head. Don't know if that was intentional or not, or if they just got a little too heavy with it, but it still looks nice. It still catches the eye very nice. The skull is more of a ash bone white, while the rest of the figure is a very dark green with some nice dry brushing along the forearms as it fades in from the elbow spikes there. Underneath the figure are much lighter shades of green, but it's still blended in nicely with the darker green base color. Let's talk about those eyes, those very nice, once again, absolutely tiny eyes. Similar to Ghidorah, the paint scheme is pretty simple for the eyes, but they are extremely effective with a glossy orange for the base of the eye, and then just the smallest slit of a black pupil. The inside of the mouth is equally remarkable. Again, this is largely all rubber. It seems to be cast in a some kind of gray base color and then painted over with this blood pink. It's a very effective method, as it doesn't create a bright pink. It's not too distracting, and if anything, it looks like it just ate something and it's bloodied. Now, on the inside of the top skull, you do have some very small teeth sculpted in. If I had any issue with this figure, I do wish those were a little larger, a little more well defined, kind of like the teeth on the bottom jaw. All right, let's go over size. This is going to be an odd one to scale up. I'm going to do my best to kind of get it in its most neutral stance. Due to the nature of this design, you can get this thing basically all the way to the ground, and you can get it much taller than this. I think this is the most fair way to try and size this figure up. So in a stance like this, it's going to be about 4 inches tall, and lengthwise, it's going to be approximately 14 inches long. Again, you can get them much shorter than this. You can get them down to probably about 2 inches tall, and you can straighten out that tail much more, probably about 2 inches more, if I were to guess. But this is approximately what a neutral stance would be. There you go. He's laying completely on the ground, and like this, yeah, he's about 15 and a half inches long. And sure, for shits and giggles, yeah, about 2.5 inches tall. All right, speaking of size, here is going to be the skull crawler next to the Hiya GVK Kong. You know, I don't hate this scaling, honestly. I kind of like the skull crawler being just a little smaller, but officially, yeah, this is a little out of scale. Now, thankfully, there's something that'll fix that we'll be taking a look at very soon. And here we have the Skull Devil with the SH Kong. In terms of scale, yeah, I'd say this is a much better scale. So if you already have an SH Kong and you're looking to get a skull crawler, yeah, this is a very good fit. These two look great together. Speaking of Monster Arts, I can't do a Monster Arts comparison without my Monster Arts Godzilla. Again, this is pretty good scaling. And we can't do a Godzilla comparison without the Hiya Toys Godzilla King of the Monsters, my personal favorite, Godzilla. And just to throw together a couple odd things that I had within reach, Here's how this figure would look with a Super 7 reaction figure there in the middle, and one of the Bandai action figure series figures on the right. Pretty sure that's just what the line is called. It's the Bandai action figure series. And once again, here's a look at how the Hiya figure scales with a couple Titanic Creations figures. I already had these lying around from the Ghidorah video, so I figured why not throw them in there. I'm not going to do the whole song and dance in its entirety. Again, I will just mention Titanic Creations did just launch their campaign for a big city display set. You can find the link in my description. Not sponsored. They didn't ask me to do this. I'm just a fan of their product, and I want to see it made and succeed. As it happens, this figure also makes an excellent banana holder. Thank you very much, Skull Devil. Your work will not go unrecognized, as now we will enjoy the banana for scale. Tell me down in the comments if you think I'm actually eating these bananas or not. I want to know. I want to know. Maybe one day I'll do a banana face cam. That will never happen, by the way. I'm never just going to sit here and eat on camera. All in all, this is basically the skull crawler action figure of our dreams. The necks are a little limited. It doesn't look down quite as much as I would like. So getting this thing in any crazy dynamic poses, like Kong holding it up like a Predator versus Alien scene, it's going to be a little tricky to do that. And that's probably the only negative thing I can say about this figure, because everything else about this is simply remarkable. Hiya knocked it out of the park. I think if you've been waiting for a figure like this since Kong Skull Island came out in 2017, I think, this was probably a no-brainer purchase for you when this came out early last year. But if you're still on the fence about this, or maybe you just haven't been able to pick one up yet, I'm pretty sure this figure is still readily available. And it's worth seriously considering adding to your collection if you have been waiting for a Skullcrawler. Now, with that said, I would like to mention now that there is kind of a 2.0 for this figure. They don't actually talk about it. It's not called a 2.0. They reissued this figure, I believe this year, 2025. And that reissue has some upgrades to this figure that weren't solicited, wasn't talked about. Hiya just said, hey, we're doing another wave of skull crawlers or skull devils, whatever, same difference. And when it arrived in box, yeah, there's a couple differences. And we will be talking about that. That will be its own separate video. But that is something to note, is that as of right now, this original figure, you can't get it anymore because they stopped manufacturing it. They're only manufacturing the quote reissue. So if for some reason you want this version very specifically, if you're a completionist, or even if you buy a couple of these secondhand on eBay or wherever, just be aware that there are two different versions. They're not so drastically different that you're getting ripped off if you get one or the other. The biggest takeaway is that the new one does not have the rubber membrane. They have plastic membrane to get around breakages. Again, that'll be its own separate video as it is a different figure. And, that's the name of the game here with this series, is taking a look at all of the figures. But I wanted to get that out there now rather than wait, 10 videos to bring it up. Now, this figure does bring up a very interesting discussion on price. This is a full $50 figure from Hiya Toys. And what you see here is all you get. Doesn't come with any accessories, doesn't come with a stand. It is a much tougher pill to swallow, charging the same price for this as something like a Godzilla, a much larger figure, much beefier figure. I think a couple accessories would have really done a lot to sweeten the pot here. For example, once again, this figure is meant to represent the Skull Devil, the much larger skull crawler. So I think it would have been a very easy opportunity to include a couple tiny skull crawlers to go alongside this. Not a lot of them, maybe 3. They could be unpainted, they could be unarticulated, but something like that would have done a lot for the perceived value here. I think, if anything, this is demonstrating the limitations of Hiya's flexibility with price. They've demonstrated with Ghidorah that they're willing to go higher than $50 if necessary, but they are demonstrating here that they're unwilling to go less than $50 if necessary. I think much like Mothra, this is a solid $30, $35 figure, maybe even $40. But for 50, I just really think that we should have gotten just a little more. It's not the end of the world. I'm not saying that this is a bad figure, that you shouldn't buy this at that price point. That's just my feelings on this being so small, being it is what it is, and paying the price that we did for it. Anyway, thank you all for joining me once again. Let me know how you feel about this figure. Let me know how you like these videos, if there's anything else you'd like to see differently. Trying to figure out how to shake these up a little bit. I've gotten a good groove of making these videos, but I feel like I could still do a little more, and I haven't quite figured out what that is. If you have any ideas, let me know in the comments. Other than that, until next time, guys, see you.